welcome to this blended homestead. Today we will be planting fall potatoes. I live in Zone 8B and it is September 1st. So typically in my zone we plant potatoes in February, around mid-February, but sometimes you can plant in the fall. Because I'm impatient, I'm going to plant some potatoes in the fall and just see what's going to happen. The great thing about your first year gardening is that everything is an experiment, and I'm just going to experiment and see what happens. I'm going to take you along for the ride. So here are the potatoes that we'll be planting today. I have a mixture of 4 different kinds of potatoes. This one here is the Adirondack Blue, and over here these are the Sarpo Mira, and they are both from Wood Prairie Farm. I chose the blue one because look at that, isn't it gorgeous? And the Sarpo Mira because the flavor quality, get out of here, bug, is supposed to be really great. So the other one I'm planting are these cute little ones. You see them? They are from Baker's Creek, and they are the Huckleberry Gold. Now, I chose them because they are supposed to be really lower on the glycemic index than most other potatoes, and because I do have family members who suffer from diabetes, I thought this would be a great option for them. And the last potato, which, you know, is just an experiment, is a russet potato that I got from the store. And when you get potatoes from the store, you have to make sure that they are organic. Some potatoes, if they're not organic, they will not sprout, and you really need them to sprout. So these are russets. I'm going to throw it in there and see what happens. These are the things that I'm using today to plant potatoes. So over here are 4, I believe they're 15-gallon buckets, and I also have these 2 large 27-gallon buckets that we'll be using. I have a shovel, of course, the potatoes, and a measuring tape if I want to get super accurate. I have compost, and I'll talk more about compost later. You can use whatever compost you want, even your homemade compost. But this is just what I chose today. I have 2 different kinds. One is from Blue Ribbon, and the other is Land and Sea. And then I have soil. Now, the soil, or the planting soil that I'm using today, is the Pro Mix Organic, and that's because it is the most decent one that I found that's on sale. Now, I'm sure you saw that some of these are already filled. So earlier in the year, I got some soil from a local company and compost. So it was a garden soil and compost mix, and I went ahead and filled them halfway up. Now, I will talk more about my soil testing results, but I know that the compost and garden soil mix that I have in there are really high in potassium and phosphorus, which coincidentally, that's what potatoes need. So I'm not going to fill them up with any more compost. They have enough organic matter. I will just finish topping them off with soil. Lastly, and most important, I can't forget my garden buddy, Roman. Hi, Roman. You ready to plant potatoes today? Yeah. Yeah, you ready to plant potatoes? And there's Rhea, my little gardening nuisance, but I love her. Hi, Rhea. Are you going to help today? Are you going to help? Now, the easiest way I've found to mix this is with my hands, and that gives me an opportunity to pull out any big material, large material that may have a longer time breaking down, and I'll just pull that out. So I'm going to mix. Now, in the soil that I have in here already, I did a mixture of compost garden soil, cocoa coir, earthworm castings, and rabbit manure. So it has enough organic material that I just topped it off with the Pro Mix. Full disclosure, Pro Mix contains mostly peat moss. Now, if you watch my other video, you know that I'm not a huge fan of peat moss. I prefer coco coir just because of how it's made. And peat moss, it is a limited resource, and so coco coir is more of an unlimited, so I prefer to use that. But this material was on sale. Pro Mix was on sale at my local box store, and so that's what I'm using. I just want to make sure that I mix this up really well. The great thing about the Pro Mix is I'm not seeing a whole lot of really large material. I found a couple pieces, so like this, and I'm just going to put that to the side. Now, you know, in a lot of cases that can be used to help with retaining moisture and drainage, but because I also have some perlite and vermiculite in here, I do not need it, and it just takes longer because the soil that I used before has low nitrogen. I am not going to want for other things to hold up nutrients in the soil while it breaks down. So I have the rest of the containers filled. Now I'm going to mix some more potting soil to fill the larger containers. As I mentioned, I'm going to fill it with Pro Mix. And yes, I'm struggling. So this bag of Pro Mix is packed, it's compressed to make 2 cubic feet of soil. And that's great, but it's hard to come out. All right, so I have that bag in. I'm going to go ahead and add some of the compost. Now I'm going to mix them. So I have the Espoma, Land and Sea, and I also have the Blue Ribbon Organics. Now I'm just going to break up some of the large pieces. Before I add those, I'm going to add a little bit of earthworm castings. Baby. One of the things you want to look for when you're choosing a compost is the amount of macronutrients that it contains, whether it has higher nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium. You want to pay attention to that. Ask me how I know. You can see this compost is really dark And there's not a lot of large material, so it's broken down quite a bit. All right, let me show you what it's looking like. There's not a lot of large material, so that's wonderful. It indicates that it's been aged for a good amount of time. And we're just going to mix all of this up together. I'm going to pull out my shovel, but I just wanted you to see what it looks like. Now, I did add a bit more vermiculite and perlite in here, but I'm not going to worry about adding a ton because our soil has quite a bit. So I'm just going to mix this up with my shovel and we'll get ready to fill those other larger containers. If I were able, I would be planting potatoes in the ground, in trenches, because I feel like that is the best way to grow potatoes. They just yield bigger harvests and you can plant a lot more. Unfortunately, I'm not able to do that right now. The soil that I have is really bad and it would take quite a long time for me to amend it. Also, I have a mole and gopher problem in my area, and that is why the gardening that I do is either in raised beds or in containers. Let me know if you grow potatoes in the ground or if you're growing them in containers like I am. As you can see, that amount of soil mixture did not fill those up. So we're going to mix up some more. Oh, the fun of gardening. One of the things that I definitely was not prepared for when I started my gardening journey is just how much work it is. I swear I have never worked harder in my life. So those beds that you see, I have 3 big beds and 2 small beds, and I hand filled those up using the same type of method that I'm using to fill up these containers. So that was fun. But I feel like in the gardening videos that I watch, and I have watched a lot, the actual work part of it isn't very well reflected. And I'm not going to sugarcoat this. It is work, especially when it's 90 degrees outside. I mean, you saw how I quickly put my gardening hat on and put my chicken shoes on. Like, that's how real this was, okay? So I definitely want to let you know that gardening is a lot of work. That being said, it is also very rewarding when you can harvest just even a small tomato that you grew from seed. Like, it's such an amazing feeling and it is so worth it. And the good thing is, when we fill these up, we don't have to fill them again. The only thing we have to do moving forward is amending the soil with compost and fertilizer, and that is it. So this is the hardest part, and then you won't have to do it again. Now comes the fun part, planting the potatoes. Now that I have my containers half full, we can go ahead and start planting. Now, the reason why I didn't fill it up to the top is because later on, as the potatoes grow, I'm going to hill them. What that means is just putting more dirt on top of the growing potatoes in kind of a mound, and this is supposed to help with yielding more potatoes, so it's in layers. I don't know, we'll see. I didn't plan to worry about hilling, but since I don't feel like filling it all the way up, I figured that'd be a good excuse to do it. I am going to use this tool, the stibbler tool, and I'm going to use it to make the holes to plant the potatoes. You want to plant them, well, I'm going to plant them 3 inches deep, which is about here. Now, when you're planting the potatoes, you want to make sure that this part, your eyes are facing up. Now, since this has 2, I'm going to put it in like this. This one has 1 main one. I'm going to stick it in like this. And this is where the growth will come from. So you just want to make sure that you're doing that. I'm going to start today with my Sarpo Mira, and I'm going to just plant them probably 4 to a container. This is a 15-gallon. I'm probably going to do 4. Really, if you want larger potatoes, 2 might be the max in this container. But I kind of like potatoes around this size, so I think I can get away with 4 and then having maybe 6 or 7 in the larger containers. So I'm going to go ahead and start planting.
I wanted to mention fertilizing. You can fertilize your potatoes during the time of planting, or you can do it later. As I mentioned before, I am not fertilizing in these 4 containers because part of the garden soil mixture that I use, I know is really high in phosphorus and potassium. That, along with calcium, are what potatoes really need, and not so much nitrogen. Now, you can plant your potatoes and fertilize them with a well-rounded fertilizer, or you can choose something like bone meal that is higher in potassium, calcium, and phosphorus.
Okay guys, now that we're done filling up the pots, we're going to cover it with hay. That is going to help seal in the moisture. And the last thing I'm going to do is label it, because in 4 months, I may not remember what I have planted. So let's finish this up. Now, the straw that I'm using is this garden straw, and it's worked really well. I have this covering all of my beds, and what I like about it is it doesn't have a lot of grass seed or any kind of chemicals in it, so I know it's safe for my plants, and it's just going to really help with that moisture level. I'm in Texas. I mean, it is hot now, and while it may not be as hot going forward into the cooler months, it will also protect it from any extreme colds that we may get.
Am I the only one that finds watering the garden really relaxing? Add a comment if you also like watering the garden. Eventually, we're going to get drip irrigation, but for now, I'm just loving taking the time to water by hand.
And there we have it, guys. We have 36 seed potatoes planted. And that was the hardest part. The hardest part is just getting it ready. And now we just have to wait for it to grow, and they will be ready in about 4 months. I didn't show this one on camera, but I planted the Huckleberry Gold in this 25-gallon fabric container. I'm really interested to see how this compares to the hard containers that I used for the other ones. Okay, guys, that will be a wrap for planting potatoes. I'm hot, I'm dirty, I need to go get cleaned up. But I hope you were able to see how easy it was to plant potatoes, and the hardest part was really mixing the soil. And now we get to sit back and watch our potatoes grow. I may have to put some supports for the leaves if they start growing unruly. And of course, I will add more dirt later on to the top, but it's pretty hands off. So I'll be sure to bring you guys along in January when we get ready to harvest the potatoes. And that's going to be so fun. I cannot wait. Thank you so much for being here, and I'll see you next time.